Hajime.
I mean, he's pretty critical.
I thought he was boring.
Oh, dip.
Don't like him.
Don't like worst?
What's to like? He's boring.
If he's boring, then put him in neutral.
I'll put him in neutral.
Okay.
I'll follow your lead. Loving the main milk toast.
I'm completely qualified to be making this video. Why? Oh, you thought I only had Nagito? You thought that I would own this without owning this? Never separate them. Oh, they literally live on my nightstand. Like, they keep me safe at night. Like, Danganronpa has a fascinating narrative premise even outside of its main plot. Because the plot is a bunch of teenagers being put into an elimination game, but when we observe the outer context, we can see exaggerated parallels to our own world. Both Danganronpa 1 and 2 start with their respective protagonists describing the acclaim of Hope's Peak Academy. It's a school where no student can apply. You must be scouted. The staff must deem you worthy of its institution. The very first line that Makoto provides the player is, "The massive high school towers over all the other buildings in this bustling urban area." We're establishing the dominance that this academy has from the get-go by describing this visual. Makoto even makes a very bold claim. They say that if you come here and manage to graduate, you'll be set for life. The mission statement of this school is to raise hope for the nation's future because it's only recruiting students who are the best in their field. The student body of this academy's main course is therefore made up of ultimates, a very casual title given to clueless high school students. Hope's Peak Academy fostering a system where they measure a child's worth based on talent is doomed to backfire eventually. And unfortunately for him, Hajime Hinata was its first victim. That was for dramatic effect, but I have a point to make here. As I'm describing this, don't you think that this all feels familiar? Isn't there already a culture where academia is deemed the most important part of an adolescent's life? In my experience in America, university propaganda was a part of my primary school experience. At some point, every single classroom on campus was assigned a random university, and we would have to learn its alma mater, and we would have to swear an oath that we were going to go there one day. And there is nothing wrong with wanting children to reach for the stars and to hand them a tangible goal that will statistically set them up for success. Those charts that you see where the higher the degree level, the higher you will be paid, yeah, they're factual, but they're also leaving out contextual information when they're consumed blindly. The highest paying jobs require a bachelor's or higher, and that doesn't even account for the amount of money that you have to invest into getting a master's or a PhD in order to get some in return. That's the kind of money that can be completely inaccessible to some people and their family circumstances. It's almost like academies like to prey on student finances. In Japan, academic pressure seems inescapable. Back in 1872, the Meiji government introduced a system where higher education could be accessible to anyone who was smart enough to qualify. The entrance examination became the sole instrument by which all students were measured. Tokyo University became the pinnacle of academic achievement and the gateway to future success. The same Tokyo University that gets visually compared to Hope's Peak Academy? Interesting. Entrance exams are entrenched in Japanese education culture. There is a commonplace term called shiken jigoku, which translates to examination hell. There are cram schools that you can pay for, which go atop of regular schooling. Everywhere you turn, it seems success is entirely dependent on exam scores. The university entrance examination is the gatekeeper that provides access to and ultimately determines students' future success and status. Does that sound anything like Danganronpa's academy being the gatekeeper and being able to boldly determine whether or not a student will be successful in their lifetime? Let me cook. I know that the cast of Danganronpa mentions that Hope's Peak does not hold entrance exams and that may be like one of the appeals of the academy, but is that really true? Can you really, for certain, state that there is no such thing as having to test for this school when the school itself is actively testing random high schoolers and measuring their capabilities and choosing the qualitative best of the best every year? Each year? Hajime Hinata is not a victim of a fantastical, ultimate-infused sci-fi circumstance. He's a child suffering through the all-too-relatable academic pressure. Hope's Peak Academy is harboring so-called worthy students, those who are able to raise the hope for the nation's future, implying very heavily that those that are untalented and don't carry an ultimate cannot raise hope for themselves or for anyone around them. You all laughed when Nagito went on that maniacal rant at the beginning of the second chapter of Danganronpa 2, where he was like,
"They say that effort breeds success, but that's a complete lie. The world is not that accommodating, which means unworthy humans will never become worthy, no matter what they do."
This is not only to draw attention to his worldview, it's to draw eyes to the outside's worldview. He is literally outlining the exterior culture that surrounds Hope's Peak Academy. He's stating what's always been insinuated by an institution like this existing. Hope's Peak created a reserve course aside from its main course in order to fund its institution. This is a program where any untalented student can just pay a high tuition fee and get enrolled. But it does not show exemplary effort into its reserve students. All of the shots that we get of Hajime in his classroom are that of a regular private high school. Someone loses their life on the reserve campus, and they prioritize public perception. All of this to show that Hope's Peak is just another corrupt institution. This is not philanthropy for the sake of nurturing hope. It's a business that has warped young minds into thinking they need to be spectacular and have an ultimate talent by the time that they're 16 in order to be respected and provided a life. Danganronpa is not rooting its systemic issues in fiction. It's hyperbolically reflecting an academic culture that already exists. There are young kids across the globe that fall under the university spell. You must succeed academically. You must get that high degree in order to gain a right to lead a fulfilling and financially stable life. So, what happens when a student fails to make up for the outstanding pressure on them? What happens when they feel overworked, overwhelmed, and insufficient? What happens when a young kid sees all of these ultimates graduating from this acclaimed institution and realizes he doesn't have a talent to rely on, that he is the general public, that he is a helpless nobody who cannot change an oppressive system by himself? And when he tries to stand against it, he gets knocked back down. Physically. We're physically shown that. By the time that we meet first year Hajime, he's been beaten into submission by society standards. He's attending Hope's Peak Academy through its reserve course, and in his classroom, he stands against a window that perfectly overlooks the main course campus. That green light is so far yet so close. We don't get much of a concrete backstory on Hajime. I know there's a plethora of reasons for why he wasn't given a background. He's a stand-in player character, he's insecure and doesn't like talking about himself, but I don't think there's any case where not giving your character a backstory is the better option over giving them one. But we will digress and move on. I was supposed to do that from the beginning, but he's there now. The one flashback that we get with him in Danganronpa 2 is that one CG where he's sitting in a high school classroom surrounded by peers who are outwardly judging him. By the way, his former high school is called Kadaka High School. Is that not a cute Easter egg? In this scene, he longs to be in a place where I can be more confident. And at first I was really confused because I didn't understand why he would view the reserve course as a place where he can be confident. If anything, actually attending it worsened his self-perception. In one moment, he's unhealthily distanced and idolizing this one campus, wishing that he were an ultimate who could attend, which is unattainable from his perspective on being talented. And in the next moment, he's actively drowning on the very campus that he admired because everything points out the window. Unhealthily idolizing the academy led him to believe that simply attending it would be enough because he gets to say that he went to Hope's Peak Academy. But instead, when he finally does, nothing changes. Despite having an ID for the school of his dreams, despite being walking distance from the main campus, the distance that he felt from himself and feeling worthy was always going to be miles deep. This isn't an external issue to solve, it's an internal conflict that can only be resolved by finding value within. Changing your location does not change whether or not you fit in somewhere, and attaining a title as an ultimate does not solve whether or not you feel comfortable in your own skin. Just another note to add while I'm editing, Hajime can convince himself that he needed a talent to feel proud of himself, but if attending the reserve course felt like enough of a small relief, then it was never about talent to begin with. His obsession morphed into something surface level, to desiring a mere connection to the name Hope's Peak Academy. If this had continued to go unchecked, he would have never once been proud of himself. This societal pressure that he's facing isn't worth an identity crisis, which is exactly what others tried to warn him about. Hajime is not the only character affected by the Academy's unrealistic view on ultimates. In the second episode of the Despair arc, Chiaki, the 77th class's ultimate gamer, complains to a classmate about how their class is a mess and they won't work together. Her classmate, Imposter, replies with this: "Well, people like us don't need to group together anyway. If you have a talent, your future is peachy." We're a bunch of elite kids gathered from across Japan with that motto. We have no trials we need to overcome by uniting. No reason to make friends either. That is such a depressing outlook from the supposed nation's future hope. These kids are practicing depressive habits and don't bother to change them because they're set for life. This is isolating, with no support from the academy trying to reinforce opposing values. Hajime may ultimately become the narrative victim, but the oppressive atmosphere at Hope's Peak Academy is suffocating everyone on campus. No one is safe from the superiority and the inferiority complexes being stimulated. Natsumi Kuzuryu is the younger sister of the ultimate Yakuza, Fuihiko. When she first gets transferred to the reserve course, she's headstrong on this belief that she doesn't belong with these nobodies, that her talented brother will be enough of a nepotism connection in order to land her a spot in the main course. When she talks to Hajime about this, he's skeptical, and Natsumi's offended. She says, this is a much more nefarious threat when you remind yourself that she's the younger sister to the heir of a Yakuza clan. There's a clear implication here. Natsumi feels so strongly that she shouldn't be associated with these grimy non-ultimates that she's threatening the life of another student. It's extreme, but when you think about it, can you really blame her? The institution physically separates those that are in the reserve course and the main course. It allows its main class to believe that they are inherently above everyone else, given by Imposter's words earlier. Hajime is a testament to Hope's Peak mistreating talentless people and using them as stepping stones. You know what proves that more than anything? They opened this reserve course only 1 year prior to the 77th class opening. And by the time that the 77th class was 2 months in, they were already trying to find candidates for a lobotomy that they wanted to perform on a willing guinea pig. The reserve course's sole existence was never to fund the school, it was to fund this aforementioned Kamakura Project. The Kamakura Project was named after the academy's founder, and its sole objective is to use a talentless student's body and attempt to surgically inject them with every talent that the institution has studied in order to create a superhuman who harbors the ultimate hope of humanity. The steering committee and Jin Kirigiri's approval of this project reflects the school's values, and it was never to prioritize the actual well-being of students. Also, when Natsumi is eventually murdered, it's by another reserve course student called Sato, who was trying to preserve the life of that redhead in the main course that Natsumi had threatened. This brutal crime was committed with both sides fighting for who deserves to be on the main course, because to lose or to never attend Hope's Peak Academy's main course is that big of a loss. When you attend and graduate, you're set for life. This academy claims to be nurturing the future's hope, but it instead seems to be warping young minds into thinking it is the only hope at a comfortable and meaningful life. And of course, the academy tries to muddy the water on what happened to Natsumi because they fear the public backlash they would get for letting this happen. All of that in mind, can you really blame Natsumi for wanting to take extreme measures when she's slotted into a world and culture where normalcy is discouraged, looked down upon, and frowned at? All she wanted to do was spend time with her brother. Her brother! Yet she feels like she can't because as if having a talent is the only way to be proud of yourself. This school nurtured that thought process with its mission statement. This isn't a system of thinking that a teen girl is born with. This academy's established social dynamics are tearing families and self-esteem apart by the seams, and the oppressive and prejudiced world that it creates is what led to Natsumi's demise. And even in death, she was ignored. Can you truly blame Hajime for wanting to escape that? We're gonna go ahead and rewind so we can cover Hajime's Hope's Peak arc. We get a number of conversations with Hajime to show the depth of his insecurities. While he's in the reserve course, Hajime meets Chiaki Nanami, the aforementioned ultimate gamer. When he watches their teacher Chisa chase after Imposter, he says, years of putting Hope's Peak Academy on a pedestal. Years of being trained to believe they are better than everyone else when they are just teenagers. He outwardly wishes that he had a talent, to which Chiaki replies with, in the following episode, he has two conversations with both the main class's teacher Chisa and the school advisor Tengen. He tells Chisa that he attended the reserve course in order to go to Hope's Peak because it's always been a dream of his, but I can't find the resolve. I'm not sure what he could be referencing here. Perhaps he's talking about the resolve to participate in the lobotomy project? That's only a theory. R.I.P. Mappa. When Chisa interviews him even further, he says, "But why are you so concerned about a lowly reserve corps student?" Hajime, you sound like someone that I know you would rather not be compared to. Hajime, stop. You're signaling the parallels between you and your narrative foil with fruity undertones. Just stop. Chisa gets angry at him for talking down at himself, and then delivers this line. Please keep that in mind for later. Right after this conversation, Tengen walks up to Hajime and asks about the Kamakura Project, specifically about whether or not he's decided to partake in it. And surprisingly, a very soft take against lobotomizing a child, but at least he's against it, which apparently the majority of adults in this world aren't. So I'll take what I can get. When Tengen offers the possibility of rejecting the project, Hajime says, "But my family doesn't have the money for the school fees." I wonder what kind of compromising and tight situations you can leave people in by draining them financially. Because psychologically manipulating them into thinking that they will never be enough just doesn't hit without, financial pressure. The third instance where he's challenged, but years of idolizing Hope's Peak will not be crumbled by 3 pep talks. It'll be crumbled by 4. In the third episode, he's playing video games with Chiaki. He starts asking her, "Hey, if you weren't the ultimate gamer and you sucked at games, like the rest of us, would you even enjoy playing them?" Clearly a question with deeper layers, as Hajime feels like he cannot enjoy the act of simply living. Chiaki comforts him. And for once, Hajime seems to internalize this. He thinks, even without talent, you can have hope. The scene right after this warm sunlight is coated in stark blacks and the dreary color palette of the reserve course. Because as much as Chiaki's sweet words comforted him, they cannot carve Hajime out of the oppression that he is in. These are outside factors completely out of Chiaki's control, out of any high schooler's control. Again, remember that we've rewind, so Natsumi and Sato are still alive, and they're arguing, their conflict being entirely underlined by Natsumi's determination to attend the main course. Hajime tries to comfort her. He tells her, "You can connect with your brother outside of Hope's Peak," but it's not enough. Hajime felt encouraged by Chiaki's words, but this is not a one-person issue. The real tragedy of Hajime's character is that it's too late. He can find an escape in the small play dates that he has with Chiaki, where they can stay in a bubble and ignore the outside worldview, but everywhere else Hajime turns, the world is proving his initial thought process right. It's confirming his worst fears. Natsume is a separate entity aside from him, and she's plagued with his insecurities and wanting to attend the main course more than anything. And she dies trying to achieve it. The one person he found that he could align himself with was lost. Perhaps watching Natsume get comfortable in her own skin over time would have comforted him. Perhaps that would have been enough to push him over the fence and truly believe that untalented people are worth just as much as ultimates. But he never got it. The outside worldview got to Natsume and got so in her bloodstream that her need to escape it led to a morgue. Hajime's frustration over this loss leads him to the main campus, specifically to try to talk to Mahiru, who was Sato's redheaded friend. The head of security, Juzo, stops him from entering, and when Hajime asks him to explain what happened on the reserve campus, Juzo makes up a lie. He goes as far as to say that the reserve corps students are easily replaced. Remember what I said about the Academy viewing the reserve corps as inhuman? Hajime literally tries to argue by saying, "So what if she had no talent? All lives are equal." And Juzo literally says, "No, they aren't." I'm sorry, it's not funny. What a straightforward way to paint that social dynamic. Here is yet another person spouting superiority nonsense, enforcing the very ideas that Hajime has trained himself to believe for years. Right when Hajime was getting a grasp for what hope could have been, society slaps him in the face. Both Natsumi and Sato lost their lives because of a fight over who deserves to be among the ultimates. That is the uncontrollable factor that people like Hajime and Chiaki cannot ignore. Hajime's insecurities were born because the world was already like this. And that kind of outside pressure that everyone believes in and subscribes to, it's inescapable unless you take extreme action. Ultimately, Hajime agreed to undergo the Kamakura Project because the world shoved him into a corner. When he tries to physically challenge the obstacle in his way by picking a fight with Juzo, who is reinforcing his insecurities, he gets beat up. Of course, this is the turning point and the climax of his decision. A much older and stronger societal standard does not let you breathe. Juzo is the symbol for it in this scene. And when Hajime gets the confirmation that he cannot single-handedly change things, he gives up. Chiaki offers to play a game with him, and he rejects her. He can no longer stand to stay in the bubble that she created for him. He pushed away the one person who tried to be close with him, and subsequently denied sincere hope. He wants to consent to his body becoming a vessel instead of a person. This entire time, he has spent convincing himself that he is not worth enough to be a person in the first place. He never let himself develop an identity to be proud of. Truth is, he was already a vessel before the Kamakura Project even landed on his desk. Here's how the anime describes the Kamakura Project. The subject will gain every known talent in this world. The subject's own senses, feelings, thoughts, and ideals will be destroyed. But to create the super high school level hope and save this world, that is a trivial issue. Let's remind ourselves of academic pressure. The connection between and the entrance examination system is self-evident. This is a paragraph from a note written by a Kyoto University student. The only significance of life is to enter Tokyo University, which is the best in Japan. When I entered Kyoto University, students and professors here look so inferior to those in Tokyo. I could not be proud of being a student here. I know that this is a dark comparison, but I think there's value in observing the extreme pressure that some individuals face when it comes to societal expectations and standards, especially when we're trying to analyze a character such as Hajime. He faced extreme pressure, and measuring outside factors such as Japan's academic culture feels integral. The pressure that everyone faces to try to attend it, that Natsume did, that Hajime did, that everyone in the reserve course did, considering they knew the weight of attending a school like this, is the academy maintaining the ultimate control over your life. There's also undeniably a dynamic where Hajime thought to trust Hope's Peak, because they're the renowned school of the century. But all the academy ever did for him was ask him to give up his body, and after forcefully being taught that he could not possibly be useful for anything else, he agreed. Even if he thought the project would only give him talent and that he wouldn't lose his memory, he would still be opting to give up the last bit of his authenticity. It's artificial talent. Hajime deciding to throw away his body and honest personhood is giving up your life due to academic pressure. The surgery goes. It goes. Guys, I genuinely feel sick to my stomach. I already knew that it was popularly and canonically known that Hajime, in between surgeries, woke up and was really distressed, and he was saying that he didn't want to do it anymore, but the surgeons widely ignored him and then they just kept going with it. Turns out that that line of evidence is in the anime, but it's said so vaguely and subtly that I missed it the first time I watched it. One of the researchers is talking and he's like, when I observed him last, he was far too distraught to be the super high school level hope. Some of the subject's personality still remained at that point. We have already deleted that personality. Let me in there and let me strangle every single surgeon in that room. From Hajime Hinata, Izuru Kamakura rises from the surgery table. And with every talent in his belt, it's really no surprise that he finds everything to be boring. By the way, they didn't bother giving him a new uniform. They didn't bother giving him new clothes. Do I need to reiterate my point about Hope's Peak not caring about the reserve course? Hajime went into the surgery hoping to attain an identity that he could be proud of, only to be erased of his memories, ideologies, and emotions. Everything that makes up an identity. Izuru Kamakura is a true empty vessel of a character with no ambition, wants, or desires. One could argue that he's just as empty as Hajime claimed he was when deciding to take on the project. Hajime literally stated he wanted to become the ultimate hope, which is what the researchers were claiming that he'd become. But Izuru's apathy is never hopeful. How could he be? He knows everything that there is to know. There is nothing to be excited about. Hope's Peak was acting in self-interest. They chose the world's hope over this child's hope. Junko Anashima gets a hold of Izuru, and as the mastermind behind every bad event that takes place in the Danganronpa universe, she uses him toward her master plan to spread despair instead of hope. Junko has an ultimate ability. She is an analyst. She predicts everything easily, from fashion trends to people's reactions to things. This upper hand allows her to manipulate situations and to create a master plan to take over the world. Because of her ability, she's bored of hope. She's tired of happy endings. Everything is so predictable to her that she craves despair. despair instead. She assumes Kamakura feels the same way because he's an ultimate analyst too. He can predict everything just as easily as she can. She promises that she can make life exciting for him if he just cooperates with her to instill despair. But Kamakura seems rather unimpressed by her displays of despair. I've always thought this, but as the ultimate analyst, isn't despair just as predictable as hope is for Junko? I can't help but think that her analyst explanation of finding hope boring is somewhat an excuse to her just being depraved and enjoying despair wholeheartedly. Kodaka himself loves Junko because she's such an unforgivable villain, so I don't entirely buy this idea that the only reason that she likes despair is its unpredictability. And lucky for me, Kamakura seems to feel the same way. At the end of the anime, he makes an argument for how hope can technically be just as unpredictable as despair if it were to rise up at the end of the story, which it does. He seems indifferent about both hope and despair, yet mildly curious that either one of them could be unpredictable, and he outwardly wonders which it will be. That's such a stellar question, Izuru. I really wonder which one it will be in an anime. Shortly after Hinata became Kamakura, the Academy's 77th class was forced to watch Chiaki die quite mercilessly. This was Junko's doing, of course, and this fall to despair led them to become a group of war criminals, dubbed as the Remnants of Despair. As a side note, when Izuru finds Chiaki on the brink of her death, only for her to collapse in front of him, he ends up crying to his own surprise, because somewhere in there, Hajime remembers Chiaki, and somewhere in there, he is faced with the worst reality of all. He lost the one person who remembers him. People live on in our hearts, but once that heart stops beating, what is there? And with her passing, he lost the one person that represented that he could have been enough by himself. I think we as a fandom often forget the severity of the 77th class becoming remnants. Hope's Peak Academy is a wildly popular school. Both Makoto and Nagito mention that there are forums discussing the incoming freshmen online every single year. Can you imagine a school where the public willingly discusses the freshmen with excitement? Therefore, to graduate from Hope's Peak is as equally as big of a deal. Each class likely gets a news cycle rotation covering each graduate, but the 77th class didn't get to graduate. Junko orchestrated a media storm by releasing the Kamakura Project into the public, and all hell broke loose from the reserve course. The Academy's public image went down the drain. The 77th class was then forced to watch their class rep die and lost their sanity. For the graduating class of the supposed nation's hope to choose and embrace despair instead, going around and committing heinous crimes against civilians at their own discretion, yeah, it's kind of a big deal. Meanwhile, the 78th class was luckily untouched by the commotion of this. I don't know how. Because of the fall of their seniors, the 78th class became the last standing hope for the Academy and for humanity. Jin Kirigiri chose to isolate them inside of the Academy in order to protect them, while the rest of the world fell into an apocalyptic state. Junko Onishima was part of that 78th class, and she orchestrated an elimination game between all of them. That's Danganronpa 1. Makoto Naegi is the protagonist of that game, and he is among one of the 6 survivors. He would end up working under Future Foundation, which was an organization trying to restore the world. See, Makoto's always been very hopeful and positive, so he decided that he wanted to try to help his former upperclassmen. He wanted to round up all of the remnants and to force them into a virtual reality psychotherapy program where their avatars would revert back to their former high school selves before the tragedy took place. They'd learn how to get along in the virtual world and learn friendship. It was a good plan until Kamakura snuck an AI of Junko into the virtual reality program without anyone noticing, therefore triggering an elimination game inside of it. You just can't catch a break, can you, Makoto? The VR elimination game is Danganronpa 2, and Hajime is our protagonist. Everyone's memory is pretty foggy since they're not supposed to remember anything that happened during high school. He's among the 77th class, the main class, so he assumes he must have an ultimate and is just forgetting it. It isn't until chapter 4 that Nagito finds out that Hajime is from the reserve course and therefore bears no talent at all. The thing about Nagito is that, as I've mentioned, he bears that Hope's Peak mentality. If you're untalented, you're with the grime on my shoe, and if you're talented, you are hope itself. He spent over 3 chapters believing that Hajime had a talent, not only because Hajime convinced himself that he must have one, but also because Hajime is inherently a hopeful person. You didn't get to see it in the anime because there is no circumstance that lets Hajime excel. himself. But during Danganronpa 2, he rises to the occasion. As a protagonist, he makes bold claims, he makes logical conclusions, he helps his class find the true culprits. Nagito, acting as the Kyoko of the game, often led Hajime down the right line of thinking. He drew his eyes to the right evidence. He let Hajime shine and lead their class to save their lives. To Nagito, no person can take control of a trial room and make correct verdicts unless they had an ultimate talent. So when Hajime turns out to be a middling reserve corps student, Nagito's pissed. His worldview has been proven to be a pile of This is turning into the Komahina videos and I don't like it. But the beautiful thing about this is that it proves that Chisa was right. Hajime had no choice but to trust his gut, instinct, and deductive reasoning. His friends' lives are on the line. He's determined to make this work. The inferiority complex has dissipated because of his bad memory. He assumes he's an ultimate who forgot his talent, and because of it, there are no mental blocks in his way toward acting heroically. One could completely assert that DR2 Hajime and Hope's Peak Hajime are not the same person. He has room to believe in himself and to act as Hope. He's always had this in him. This is his high school avatar. He just never let himself believe it. In the last trial of Danganronpa 2, we get the exposition from Monokuma and AI Junko about everyone formerly being remnants of despair. Junko exposes Hajime's true identity of being Izuru Kamakura, the one who uploaded her AI into this world. Makoto's quite shocked about Hajime being Izuru, which is really confusing considering the fact that he had to watch this entire game play out, this entire VR one, because Junko was broadcasting this game to every future Foundation member, and he knew the people that were being put inside each individual pod because he was in charge of doing that. All he needed to do was make a basic head count. Like, okay, we have Mikan, Soda, Sonia, and Kyoko? What is it? Who's that? Are you being serious? What? What do you mean? Where's Izuru? Oh my god, Makoto. What? Was he not paying attention? Hajime doesn't know octagons and Makoto doesn't know basic math. The revelation that Hajime was Izuru goes... My man is short-circuiting, but that makes sense. Like I alluded to earlier, DR2 Hajime and DR3 Hajime are not the same person. Someone in my last video worded this really well. He can't understand or empathize with himself. He can only sink into despair about the actions of a person he doesn't recognize, committed on his body in violation of his mind. Only the Hajime who has attended Hope's Peak for a while would understand, and DR2 Hajime is not him. And to paraphrase a complicated trial, Junko presents the remaining survivors with two choices: to upload their current avatars to their bodies in the real world, while their deceased classmates get a Junko AI put in them, or to force shut down the program and subsequently revert to their state before they ever entered it, so go back to being remnants of despair. The thought of losing his memories, and to lose the will and the spirit they fought to protect, to lose the memory that they have of their classmates, that's not an appealing choice. But to choose life with your deceased classmates, controlled by Junko, isn't appealing either. I think one of Hajime's charms as a protagonist is how beaten down he gets during that last trial. As the protag of the first game, Makoto never backed down and never gave up. He remained headstrong in the belief that hope will always win, but Hajime falters. Both of these choices seem like the wrong one, and he has a meltdown.
I can't choose. You guys are telling us the world's going to be destroyed unless we sacrifice ourselves. Hajime! Shut up! Leave me alone! I got dragged into this, and now my existence is going to disappear? I don't understand it at all.
He reverts back to that insecure high schooler who feels like he is completely unable to control the outcome of anything. Junko shows them what it would be like if they chose to stay in the virtual world indefinitely. But while that happens, Hajime starts seeing visions of Chiaki. In the game, she was an AI program created by Future Foundation in order to overlook and to take care of everyone. He vents to her, and he seeks comfort in his choice to not do anything. He makes the argument that, hey, if we choose to shut everything down, we'd lose every memory that we have of you. You wouldn't want that, would you? But Chiaki disagrees.
As long as everyone continues to move forward toward the future we created together, I will never disappear.
And she calls him out.
You're probably just scared, right? You're scared of moving toward the future with such a heavy burden.
And she finally to his face, confronts him with what he's been avoiding.
You've had it wrong this whole time. Having talent isn't the goal.
The only reason that he spent years idolizing Hope's Peak Academy, wishing that he could be an ultimate, it was never for the talent, it was for the confidence of it. It's all mental, babes. DR2 was teaching manifesting and the power of words in 2012, and where were you?
What's important is that you believe in yourself.
Someone cooked here. She was the first person to make him feel like he belongs, so when he finally arrives at the conclusion that he does belong and that he's worthy, she is the person that he's envisioning. In a way, she's a symbol that he carries with him, a positive reinforcement that he's on the right path. And it's beautiful, because if anything, it means that he knows it deep down. Chiaki is only a memory, and this entire conversation is his own inner monologue. Hope's Peak Academy gave Hajime a tangible goal to yearn for. The lobotomy handed him the cure, and he turned apathetic. His problems did not get solved, and with the world in ruin and no friends to turn to, he embraced despair. He didn't gain a healthy self-confidence for himself after getting what he wanted. There was no self to improve with his identity being erased. He became despair because he never chose himself to begin with. The only instant where Hajime actually becomes a fulfilled person is when he finally takes what he's longed for all along: belief in himself. Belief that even without a talent, he can be valuable, that he can bring hope to others and to himself. And with the end of DR2 and the anime's Hope arc, he finally did. Once Danganronpa 2 ends, Hajime awakens with the rest of his classmates, and using the wide array of ultimate talents that the Academy gave him, he managed to awaken everybody. There's a really sweet scene in the 2.5 OVA where Nagito finally wakes up and recognizes Hajime. At first, he sees Izuru because they were formerly remnants, but he corrects himself, recognizing that actually this is Hajime helping him up. And Hajime, instead of denying Izuru's name, proudly says, "So you want me to cry?" And to top that off, in a very emotional roller coaster of an episode, it's emotional for me, the entirety of the 77th class comes back to the mainland to defend Future Foundation, fronted by their leader Hajime. They confront this guy called Mitrai, who is on the brink of brainwashing people with a hopeful video that he made, because TLDR, he helped Junko plummet the world into despair like during the Remnant era because he created a brainwashing video that would help but break everyone's spirit. He's trying to atone for his sins by swinging in the opposite direction. And Hajime is able to walk up to him and console him. He invites him into their established family. He's able to tell Mitrai, "You don't need a right to be our classmate." He spent his teen years looking for a right. He sold his body looking for a right. And now he can say that to someone else and mean it. At the end of the Hope arc, he's once again reassured by his vision of Chiaki that this was a hopeful and happy ending for them. That now, alongside his found family, he can move forward into the future, even though it's uncertain. Nagito calls him to join everyone else to their meal, and Hajime happily accepts. Nagito, by the way, the guy that represented that same unhealthy worldview on ultimates and non-ultimates. They've come to peaceful terms. The last shot we get of Hajime is one where he's just enjoying his food with Nagito. He's not holding on to their past, he's not holding on to any past anymore. Hajime has been able to let go of everything that made him insecure. That societal pressure that kept him down, he's free of it. That is what's shown in the relationship dynamics present now. Hajime Hinata suffered through the despair of not only a depraved elimination game, but also lost his identity at his lowest mental point. The true despair that everyone faced during that last trial is learning that they acted deplorably and they can't do anything to remedy it. The only thing that Hajime and his classmates can do is move forward despite it. Hajime cannot regain the identity that he lost before he chose the lobotomy. He cannot turn back time and talk himself out of it. But in this present and exact moment, he can choose himself. He can accept himself, flaws and wrongdoings included, even through chaotic and unideal means. Despite everything, he kept his name and self with pride.
Hi, I filmed the outro when I first gave that whole presentation, but I was so low energy and so out of my own voice that I'm here refilming it. I honestly just wanted to go over some Hajime fun facts before we actually get into the outro. So firstly, his name Hajime means begin, and his birthday is January 1st. It is all encompassing of how he is striving to just move forward, build a future for himself and his classmates. I think it's really cute. Someone in the last video commented with these just mind-boggling theories on the symbolism that is presented in Danganronpa 2. So I'm going to go ahead and read from those comments. One other scene I find extra important is the beach scene in DR2's prologue. When Hajime finally lets go of his anxiety, he very symbolically gets changed into his swimsuit to go join the rest of the Ultimates, shouting stuff like, "Hey guys, wait for me, let me join too." And the second he does, the ominous storm clouds hit the beach as Monokuma takes over the Neo World program, ruining his chances at happiness and belonging. I can't not interpret this whole scene as a reflection of Hajime's whole trajectory of despair arc in a nutshell. He accepted this deal to be made into an ultimate, not knowing it was a Faustian bargain, and lost himself in the process. They also even commented that the "I was born stupid" sticker is vital characterization for Hajime. It shows how easy it is to pressure him into feeling that he has to spend a vast amount of money he might not even have, just to avoid something unpleasant. This parallels with how expensive the reserve course track is, the dreams he has about other kids' snide comments about how he doesn't have a talent, and the self-consciousness he feels about not really belonging at Hope's peak. Both of those are crazy. It genuinely makes me wonder if the sticker scene was intended to be symbolic in some way, because in hindsight it is kind of random. It's just there for the sake of comedic relief. Then again, I find it very hard to believe that the Danganronpa writers are so aware of themselves into adding details such as that, because well, they disappoint me at every other turn. So Danganronpa is originally written and released in Japanese, and in the original Japanese versions of both the game and the anime, Hajime uses ore as a pronoun. Usually, from what I've read, you would use boku in like casual settings. Watashi is more formal, and it seems like more girls use it. Ore compared to boku is more vulgar in the sense that it's comparable to slang. Again, from what I've read, mainly teenage boys, middle school boys use ore, and in a way it even has like connotations of being more macho and manly. So a lot of people interpret Hajime's use of ore, since Makoto uses boku and I imagine Shuichi does as well, that like Hajime's trying to sound more macho and more confident in himself, more casual. Similarly, he does not use honorifics in the Japanese version. A majority of the characters use honorifics like gun, san, chan. It's just a way of like being polite when you talk to people, but Hajime doesn't use honorifics, and again, people interpret that to be his way of trying to seem more casual. I don't know, it's like he's just constantly putting up this facade. He's just so insecure that it bleeds into his language. It's kind of cute. And another random fun fact, if you've ever seen like Hajime be widely associated with oranges or orange juice, it's literally because in the party scene in chapter 1 they have like CGs of everyone enjoying the party, and we get a shot of Hajime gripping onto like a little drink with orange liquid inside, and everyone was like, oh, he's drinking orange juice, so he loves orange juice. You know how fandom is. So if you ever see orange emojis or orange imagery in like fan art of Hajime, that's why. I don't know if he ever like reconfirms that he likes oranges in another like setting, but that's it. But yeah, those are all the fun facts that I could think of. Thank you guys for the overwhelming amount of support on the last video. I definitely did not expect that magnitude of people to watch or to subscribe. To be completely honest with you, it's like actually surreal. Like it's not processing to me at all, but I'm really glad that it was able to reach like a wide array of people, and I'm really happy that you guys had so much fun commenting and even watching. I'm really happy about it. I have an Instagram now. Bam. I am so bad at posting though, but I will post stories for like sneak peeks at whatever I'm doing, or I'll just be like notifying you guys whenever I upload on there, so you can feel free to follow. Yes, Naito's the profile picture because I didn't know what else to make it. The username for that is just Mushka428, which is the same as my handle here. After this, I'm probably gonna do a second part to Danganronpa Crimes Against Humanity, because after I've heard from your guys' feedback, I have compiled a list of like 20 items. So if you can think of any like specific crimes that the Danganronpa universe has done on you, you can go ahead and leave a comment so I can see if I can add it. Please continue to suggest any like videos that I can do, because the hardest part is genuinely not knowing what to film. I saw a lot of people suggesting that I should do a character tier list. I find that hard to believe though, because I feel like people watch character tier lists because they already have watched that YouTuber for years and they know their personality and they know what they're like. You know, the Game Grumps clip that I added at the beginning of this? People care about that because it's the Game Grumps. They've been around for years. But up until this very point right now that you're watching this, I literally have 2 videos on my channel. I just find it hard to believe or to imagine anyone caring what I think of Kokichi Oma in V3, you know? Like, but if you feel differently and if you're like, no, it would be fun, then let me know. I already have big projects ahead of me, because I do still want to tackle a Naito video essay and a Komahino one eventually. So thank you guys so much. Continue to suggest things. I really sincerely hope that this video was up to par with fellow Hajime enjoyers. I know you guys love this boy. I tried to just communicate what I interpreted of him in a coherent way, in a way that was meaningful. So I really hope that I delivered. I hope that I cooked. Hajime says goodbye. Kiss. Bye-bye. Also, please, I'm begging the writers to explain themselves when they made his chest size bigger than Kaede's. How does chest size work? Does it work in the way that I think it does? Because if so, what? Like, it's not even the fact that it's numerically bigger. It's like, put them side by side. Put them side by side. Why does he mathematically and accurately have a bigger chest size than Kaede? That doesn't make sense. That doesn't make sense.